All right, folks, it's time for world politics. We're going to see what's going on the political landscape and all along those lines, and we'll see if any of our regulars join us and all in that space. But the DOJ met with a longtime Jeffrey Epstein associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. So definitely it looks like the Department of Justice has interviewed the Epstein associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Schumer contemns the DOJ meeting with Maxwell and says that it stinks of high corruption. So that is something that folks are talking about on the political landscape and all along those lines. As far as the Idaho murderer, Bryan Kohberger, disfigured apparently his one of his victims, Kaylee Conclave's face, and new facts on the Idaho murders after the Kohberger sentencing suggest intense struggle and odd behavior leading up to that particular case and all along those lines. So that's definitely something that people are talking about in terms of the criminal justice system. And Gazians are dying of starvation, and some people are asking about the political motives behind the Gaza aid catastrophe as Gaza starves under Israeli blockade and U.S. says ceasefire is in question and all along those lines. So I'm going to bring Sasha Starr in a little bit, see what he's got going on, and see if anybody else joins us as well. By the way, there was a plane crash in Russia's Far East, killing all 48 on board. Russia's plane crashed in Russia's Far East. Nearly 50 people on board feared dead and all along those lines and everything like that. And Thai and Cambodian forces clash at the border, prompting a U.S. embassy alert. Thailand launched an airstrike on Cambodian military targets as deadly border dispute escalates. So there is another border dispute going on in that part of the world as Thailand and Cambodia clash in a deadly border dispute, and Thai fighter jet bombs Cambodian targets as border battles escalate. And Beijing is apparently having a trade tactic and everything like that. So EU and China ties at an inflection point, von der Leyen says, after a tense Beijing summit. So some people are asking, why isn't China wooing Europe? Because we do know that they're wooing some of the countries in Africa and Asia. But Europe and China have agreed to take action on climate change and nothing else in that 10th Beijing summit and all along those lines. And apparently the State Department cuts China experts as the administration says that they are countering Beijing as a top priority and all along those lines. And Macron, French president, says France will recognize Palestine as a state in September. So the French president, Emmanuel Macron, to recognize the state of Palestine in September at the UN General Assembly. At least that's what they are saying right now. And Zelensky is urging national unity amid talks of Ukraine anti-corruption protests. So Zelensky has introduced a bill to uphold the independence of Ukraine's anti-graft bodies, and it looks like he's backtracked on a law over anti-corruption bodies after the protests and all along those lines. And Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a prisoner swap, but little other progress in terms of the Istanbul talks and everything like that. So Russia and Ukraine have met again, and apparently there are still these conversations going on as things are looking at what will happen in terms of a peace talk. And apparently the ruble has fallen after the latest Russian-Ukraine talks make little progress. So I'm going to bring Sasha Starr in, see if anybody else decides to join us later and everything, and see what he's got going on in his world and his take on these talks that are going on around the world and all along those lines. I know you're the one that said, if anything, the only thing we would probably get is a prisoner exchange, and that does look like that is what's going on in that space. It looks like Britain and India have signed a free trade pact doing a visit by Modi, the leader of that particular country, and all along those lines. So the UK trade deal / import duty on luxury cars, but liberalization in EVs will take time. So who knows when they'll be getting EVs in that part of the world and all along those lines. So How are you doing, Sasha? It's the evening time, and apparently there's a lot going on. Oh, by the way, Saudi Arabia is pledging to invest more than $6 billion in Syria. So Syria and Saudi Arabia have signed more than $6 billion in investment deals. Saudi business delegation arrived, looks like yesterday, in Syria, and deals are worth $4 to $6 billion that are being signed. So maybe they're going to get some new development in that part of the world and along those lines. But just what is your take on what's going on worldwide? And we've got John joining us from Canada as well. So we got two Canadians joining us, and who knows, Rick
Mark,
might join later.
I'd like to understand what's the difference to American taxpayer, whether it's uh, Saudi Arabia invest 5 billion to Syria, or vice versa, Syria invests $5 billion into Saudi
Joshua, the show is called World Politics. So Nick and them asked me to find different stories from different parts of the world to talk about what's going on and everything like that. So I find the sources that I find is through whether it's the UAP or UP or the various other sources, Fox or MSNBC, and report on what's going around in the world. In some cases, like tomorrow, we'll have a guest on World Edition and stuff like that. So I use
Arabia.
some of my journalism background in order to find these different stories and all along those lines. But
Mark,
oftentimes we have experts like you that have more pertinent issues that you want to talk about, such as the Ukraine and Russia. So I would definitely love to hear what's going on in that part of the world and in the part of Canada. But since neither Nick or Kim are here, I talked to Kim earlier today and everything like that. I'm the third person in charge, so I have to pick these stories according to what I see on my sources.
Okay, very well, Mark. You sound a little bit defensive, but with all due respect, it's not your
I'll
fault
be
at
defensive.
all.
I'm just reading
In
the stories that are provided
fact,
to me and everything
when
like
I
that.
ask my question, I treat you as American taxpayer. So you probably also should be interested one way or another in one story and the other story. However, it's neither here nor there. That's okay. So Saudi Arabia invests 5 billion. Why not 3 billion? Why not 7 billion? Why it's five? But okay, they decided to do five.
Okay.
Excellent.
Well,
Hallelujah.
hallelujah.
Bravo,
But like I
Saudi
said,
Arabia. We all
yeah,
love you. Okay.
we'll see what's going on. But what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, which I know is something that you follow quite actively, and you and John can tell me what's going on in Canada.
Okay. Ukraine. What's happened in Ukraine is that you see now complete picture when the country which has a nuclear weapons cannot be stopped, cannot be talked to, cannot be argued to do one thing or another. So what they're doing right now, not only that they're killing innocent civilians, including children, women, older people, they are completely crushing Ukrainian cities, destroying cultural monuments everywhere, and nothing could be done about that. So, when there was talk that about finally Donald Trump said, "Oh, Putin makes a fool out of me, so now we are going to send Ukraine Patriot systems and other systems and more systems and all kind of ammunition." They will send it, but it all will arrive only in September. So for 50 days, Russia has a green light to do anything what it wants in Ukraine. That's what Trump did, and that's what's happened in reality. No weapons are coming to Ukraine. Some weapons are ready to go, but they're not going yet. Some weapons have to be checked out whether they're in good order, whether they're working properly, and some maintenance issues, and logistical issues, and more financial issues. There has to be set up a separate corporation that will collect money from European countries, pay for the weapons coming from US, and only once it's paid the US weapons will come to Europe, and then they have to be checked out, and from Europe they will have to come to Ukraine. That's what's happened with the Ukrainian issue. right?
Interesting. Everything. What's your take on what's going on with Iran? Because apparently Iran says it's ready for nuclear talks with the U.S., but only if Washington rebuilds trust. So Iran apparently is trying to lay down conditions for Trump in terms of resumption of nuclear talks with the U.S. And it says they're ready to for nuclear talks if the U.S. works to rebuild trust with that small nation and everything along those lines. So, what is your take on what Iran is doing? And apparently, they're trying to push Trump into a corner.
Mark, did I understand correctly that what you just said that U.S. has to build trust with Iran? Is
That's
that
what Iran says. That's what Iran says.
oh my God, that's funny. That's a that's something for a stand-up comedy.
Well,
Really.
that's what Iran said in his report. That was actually from the
I
AP
don't care
News.
what that report says. Iran has to get on its knees and ask that they want to completely destroy all their nuclear ambitions. They have to get in line, ask to remove the sanctions, and become a normal country abiding the law. If they cannot do it, it's either US or Israel or both. They will make Iran pay. So right now they have to shut up, get on their knees, and ask to become a normal country, a member of international institutions.
Yeah, apparently they've got other problems because the other story that came from the Jerusalem Post says that Iran is reconsidering relocating its capital because of a severe water shortage. So they're shut down in the face of blistering heat, and their Tehran has declared a public holiday to tackle the water shortage that they're having. So apparently they're not just having problems with what they're going to do with their nuclear power, which know that water is nuclear power is dependent on water and everything like that. So they could have a problem even in where they're going to put these nuclear plants and everything along those lines. So it seems like they've got all kinds of issues going on and everything like that. But even
Mark, leave it to Iranians to deal with this problem. You don't have to worry about that.
we'll
So
leave it to them.
they will drink less water. Maybe they should start buying Coca-Cola instead and drink Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola there is abundance of Coca-Cola, so they should sell some oil illegally to China or somewhere else and buy Coca-Cola. That's probably what they should.
Maybe that's what they got to do. But apparently, the UN top court is talking about climate change because they're saying that nations must act on climate change or they could be held responsible. So they're saying that the polluters of the world need to pay reparations for the harm that they are causing to the climate, whether that's polluters in India, polluters in the US, or polluters wherever these polluters might be. As a matter of fact, even Australia, and I know that in the past we used to have Shaquille come in regularly, was warned it could face legal action over wrongful fossil fuel action after this landmark climate rule. So, how much do you think the UN can control what countries do in terms of their climate control and their factory controls?
Uh, in place of United Nations, I would be worried what's happened if Trump will raise their rent in Manhattan for the space what they're occupying. And actually, I would check whether they're not in arrears of payments of their lease or whatever they have there. And if not, just to go a hell out of here and just go to some friendly place like Iran or North Korea and set up shop there and then worry about the pollution and other wonderful stuff. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. What's your take on what's going on in Israel? Because apparently the Knesset yesterday voted 71-13, so that was a very major victory for a non-binding motion calling for Israel to annex the West Bank. So they're saying that they have been given approval to annex the occupied West Bank. So I just wanted your take on this notion of what they're doing with the West Bank settlement. So it looks like it's going to become further part of Israel if they are able to successfully annex what they want to annex.
Well, I don't see their annexation issue at all because it is Israeli territory as a result of 6 Days War in 1967. So the West Bank and Gaza, it's all Israeli territory. They cannot annex their own territory. It just never happened in the world. So
Mhm.
I don't know what Knesset is so worried about, why they needed the vote.
What
It's
even?
Israeli proper territory. What Israeli need is to govern it, occupy it with their own citizens. Those Arabs who live there and they want to become Israeli citizens, that's okay. Well, they have to pass some exams, they have to know Hebrew, a few other things, but potentially, I mean, there are 2 million people out of 9 million people. Two of them are Arabs, and they are citizens of Israel. They live in Israel, they work in Israel. So could West Bank people. Gazan people also could do the same, but they hate Israel so much that they rather die rather than become Israeli citizens. But that's their choice. There's nothing.
Their choice and everything. I did see that apparently in the situation with Russia and Ukraine, both of the sides have hit a top resort city. So the city of Sochi has been hit and everything like that. So I was just wondering the importance of Sochi. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly and everything to both of these countries because it looks like both countries have launched attacks on that a particular resort. And like I said, not being from that part of the world, you'll have to tell me more as to the importance of that resort city.
Well, Sochi was either the most important place in the south when there is a nice climate, when even now all Putin, most of its meetings are taken in Sochi or close to Sochi, right? The second place was Crimea, also with a beautiful climate, wonderful scenery, and before this war, which Russia started in 2014, almost all Russian oligarchs and many just well-to-do Russians, they had they owned places in Crimea, and there was no issue. They never needed visa to come there. They could be there any time of the year. Now, since the war, which Russia started, the situation is somewhat different. Sochi, it's a Russian territory. Ukraine doesn't have any desires on taking over Sochi. What Ukraine should be doing, but I guess it's not going to happen until this 50 days that Trump gave Putin will pass. Ukraine has to start bombardment of Russian territories, and not only like oil refineries or some other military desired structures, but doing the same what Russia is doing to Ukrainian cities, and start right with Moscow. And then to ask Putin, well, are we going to continue, or maybe you have some different thoughts? That's probably sooner or later will have to happen.
Yeah, looks like the U.S. Army, by the way, fired a new missile system in the Western Pacific, and apparently it found its target and sank it. So apparently we were shooting a missile near China and everything like that. So definitely this could be escalating some of the conflict between Russia and China. So it'd be interesting to see what Trump's relationship with China becomes as well. But that was reported in the Business Insider and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see whether that makes the conflict between the U.S. and China more intense and all along those lines. But only
Well,
time will tell right now. I think he's either on his way to play golf in Scotland or he's going to do it this weekend. But it does look like there might be some efforts to get some Scottish golf going on. And we got Rick joining us too. So how you doing,
Noah,
Rick?
I'm medium. I might have COVID, but taking some pills for it. And nobody has COVID tests anymore. I went to the library, which used to have them. I went to CVS, used to have them. The government isn't supplying COVID tests anymore. So, Trump contributed to the deaths of 1.4 million Americans from COVID. And now that he's president again, he's going to keep it going. See if he can break 1.5 million.
Wait a minute. You said you went to different sources, including CVS and I assume maybe even Walmart, and there were no.
I went to two
Yes.
places. The library used to have them. They said that the county no longer supplies them. I went to CVS. They used to have them.
Yes,
No
CVS used
more.
to carry.
So, but I used an old test that's been expired for a few months, and I came in way positive, but it would be better to use a test that isn't expired that would give you more accurate results, but nobody has the frickin' tests. So I'm just assuming that the old, test was accurate and I'm behaving accordingly.
Acting accordingly and all along those lines. I do notice that even when I go around on mass transit, a lot of folks are still wearing, they make the mask available. I don't see a lot of people wearing their masks. It's usually people that are got pre-existing conditions, or being a certain age and things along those lines. But I don't see the vast
COVID
majority.
is still there, and it still kills 1,000 Americans a week. It's still more deadly than flu. It takes a really bad flu year to kill 50,000 Americans. Yeah, in an average year, flu will kill between 20 and 30,000 Americans. But COVID is still killing about 50,000 a year.
Wow, I did not realize that. Rick, because we talked about it earlier today, and I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of World Politics and everything. What is Ghislaine Maxwell saying now that she's been having these conversations with the Department of Justice? I haven't been following the case long enough to see whether she's bringing out any more dirt on the possibility of either Trump or Obama's or anybody's involvement on Epstein Island.
So she's got a 20-year prison sentence.
Right.
And Trump has the capacity to pardon her. So, what would she say? What she might say is biased by the chance of getting out of prison, 12 years early or 15 years early if he pardons her.
Yeah, and he might pardon her and everything like that. And so maybe he's waiting to hear what she's going to say. And maybe she'll say that he was never on the plane, even though there are documents that say that he was on the plane and in the plane and even in the island. So maybe she's going to recant some of her testimony and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on in that space. What are you finding out about just in general in terms of what's going on in your world in California, other than the fact that it's hot as all get out, because it's hot as all get out in North Carolina. So I imagine it's hot as all get out in California as well.
I don't know. California is just like every place else right now. There's nothing. Trump took back the National Guard troops that he deployed there. He deployed 4,000 National Guard to help with the riots that he said were burning down Los Angeles, which they weren't. They were barely riots. They burnt down some Waymo driverless taxis. They destroyed 5 of those, but that was the major damage there. They figured out a way to attack the taxis. Somebody would just call up and order a taxi, and it shows up. It doesn't have a driver. It can't defend itself, so it's ripe for vandalism. But that was about the extent of the damage compared to real riots, like during the George Floyd riots, which were actual riots. 160 police cars got vandalized. So 5 driverless taxis compared to 160 police cars, quite different. The troops didn't know why they were there. It was freaking ridiculous. But they've been sent home now.
Yeah, they've been sent home and everything like that. So did they send everybody home, or do they still have some troops over there?
I don't know. Trump also sent in like 700 Marines. I don't know if they're still there. Again, not needed.
Oh, I'm still trying to figure out how he's going to put ankle bracelets on all of these migrants that he says he's going to put ankle bracelets on and all along those lines, because there was some ridiculous amount of migrants that he was going to basically put in house arrest. Well,
it's a nice gesture to put an obvious, an obvious token of servitude on somebody's ankle. But if they wanted to keep track of people, all they'd have to do is find out their cell phone number, and that would be just as effective, but it wouldn't look as badass as forcing them to wear ankle bracelets. And remember, most of these people are not criminals. It's not a crime to be in the U.S. past your visa running out. It's a civil offense, and you can be kicked out for it, but you can't be sent to prison for it until now, when those guys can do whatever the fuck they want.
But tell me, Rick, isn't it a state issue, the governor who has to send troops in case of some unrest and some?
Yeah, the governor is in charge of his state's National Guard.
Okay, so what's the role of a federal government? How federal government can mingle into what belongs to state?
The last time a president interfered with the National Guard was in 1967, when President Johnson sent in the National Guard to defend black people who were protesting for civil rights in the state of either Alabama or Arkansas, one of those.
I think that particular case was Alabama.
So that was the last time that happened was 58 years ago, in response to a real situation. And this Trump thing was a bullshit, in response to a bullshit situation. So,
and to answer your question, I think it was twice. I think it was George Wallace in Alabama that they sent national troops to and everything, and then there was also troops sent to help the kids get into the schools in Little Rock, Arkansas. So you are correct that it was two of the A states, Arkansas and Alabama, that had troops try to help things historically and everything like that. They definitely had to help the kids get in and integrate the schools there in Little Rock.
And looking back, I would trade a lot of our politics. Now, George Wallace was a racist governor of Alabama, right?
Yes, he was Alabama.
Right. So, but when you look at his brand of badness, he was like he eventually, I think, renounced his racism and turned out to, in his later years, to not be such an asshole. And
I think he renounced his racism, and I think it was also found out that he had a daughter, I think it was a daughter that was partially African American because of a relationship he had with an African American young lady and everything like that. I think that was George Wallace. It might have been Strom Thurmond, but it was definitely.
I know for sure it was Strom Thurmond. I don't know about George, but the deal is, I would take the worst politicians of 60 years ago and trade them. I'd rather have them. Nixon, terrible guy, but still 50 times better than the current guy.
After he was shot and crippled, right? So he spent.
So what did you say?
Yeah. Wallace got shot by a crazy guy and was paralyzed.
Yeah, Wallace got shot. Yeah.
But freaking Nixon, even though a terrible guy, he still listened to the people. He started the Environmental Protection Agency. He didn't believe in it, but he believed in listening to people, and the people wanted environmental protection. He started the war on cancer, which has decreased in 50 years. The number of people who don't make it 5 years, but without a recurrence of cancer, has been cut in half. Now, back when Nixon was president, half of everybody with cancer had a recurrence within 5 years. Now it's only 1 person in 4 has a recurrence, and the rate of that number keeps declining by 1% every year. And Nixon started that.
Yeah, Nixon definitely started that, and all along those lines. But there are people that are speculating. I think John speculated one time that this could be the closest that we've had to a Watergate situation since Watergate. So are we going to start seeing folks investigating some of these things going on in the White House and everything? And are we possibly going to be heading toward a Vance presidency before the end of next year? And is that going to be a good thing, or do we have to find a way to get rid of both of them? So what is our thoughts around this possible investigation that could cause
Trump has insurance because Vance is just as terrible as Trump. And Vance has insurance because I think if Vance is kicked out, I think it becomes Johnson, the Speaker of the House, right? And he's terrible too. I don't know how deep you'd have to go in the batting order to get to somebody who's not awful.
Because I'm trying to remember. I remember there was that famous quote. Sasha can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the Secretary of State, and I'm trying to remember who the Secretary of State is now, is either fourth or fifth, because there was that whole conversation when Alexander Haig was being put out there, but he was further down the order than the actual order exists and everything like that. So at that time he was Secretary of, I think he was Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense when that.
Yeah, and Haig jumped in there, I think, when Reagan got shot.
When Reagan
and
got shot.
Haig just jumped right up and said, "I'm in charge right now." And he, so even though he really wasn't, he was that kind of guy.
Yeah, because it should have been Bush. They should have been in charge because Bush was the vice president at the time. So it should have been Bush that jumped up and said he was in charge and everything. But like you said, Haig was very much one of those people that would come out there and just state what he felt was correct and everything like that. He was one of those gung-ho, take charge kind of people and everything. Well, I'm looking up the order of succession just out of curiosity and everything like that. What is going on, John and Sasha, in Canada and all along those lines? Because I know it can't just be with world politics, what's going on in Europe and what we've got going on here with Trump, but there's got to be things happening in your neck of the woods as well.
No, not really. It's pretty quiet. We're looking at you guys. The Senate is shut down for the summer, so I guess your Senate is on vacation.
Yes, ours is on vacation. You saying yours is on vacation as well?
No, I don't think so. I'm just noting that that was the first time that the state's the Senate has shut down for the summer. I guess it's too hot, or maybe it's got something to do with those abstaining.
The U.S. is among about 50 nations that isn't making enough babies to keep the population stable. Right now, for the first time in history, the average number of births per woman in the U.S. has dropped under 1.6 to 1.599. which is only 76% of the number of babies that you need to keep the population stable, which means that we have room for, just to keep the population from declining, we have room for 1 million immigrants a year. So it's not like we're being overwhelmed with immigrants and we're being overcrowded. If we kick out a ton of immigrants like Trump wants to do this year, for the first time in history, we may have a drop in population.
There could be a drop in population, you said?
Yeah, because we make through birth about 3.6 million babies a year. To keep the replacement level of babies per year is over 4.5 million, something like 4.6, 4.7. We're 1 million short, which is fine, but it also means we've got room for people.
Yep, no doubt. By the way, well, I just found the list, but I found the list of the people and everything. You can tell me who they are, but the order of succession, if anything should happen to the president, is the vice president first, so that would be Vance, which is Johnson.
And then it goes to the Senate, probably.
Who's our current Secretary of State?
I don't know. Is it Marco Rubio?
I think that's Marco Rubio. Then the Secretary of the Treasurer, then the Secretary of Defense, then the Attorney General. Wouldn't that be that lady? Yeah, that'd be
Pam Bondi. So of all those people, the only one who might have some inherent decency is Marco Rubio. He rolls over pretty easily, but if left to his own devices, he will tweet out Bible verses and actually might have some decency. But he's fourth in line, so behind president, vice president.
He's way down there.
So it's not going to happen.
I hate to tell you this, but it's not going to happen. We have to have some serious disaster that almost like taking out the entire.
And we don't want
that. Get down to the Secretary of the Homeland Security, which I believe isn't that Kristi Noem? Because they are in the succession plan as well. It goes down after the Attorney General, the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of the Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Health and Human Services, which one of them would be RFK, Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and then the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Well, yeah, most of them are horrible people. I mean, it would be interesting to see President Kristi Noem just from a comedy point of view, but it would be terrible for the country.
Oh, that would be totally terrible for the country. That would be, yes. It would make for great comedy and all along those lines. No doubt about that.
Is there anything going on in AI, which, Sasha is a big investor in it, and
NVIDIA is still breaking the bank?
Well, my investment to AI is basically I'm considering the best indicator of what's going in that investment field is a stock by the name NVIDIA, because you cannot think about AI or anything without NVIDIA. All this new infrastructure that's being built now, considering the data centers, nothing can be done without NVIDIA. So that's all what you need to know. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of brain to understand what's the role of NVIDIA is in all this process. And once you understand that, that's the only stock what you need. Period.
So I just looked up what an NVIDIA chip does. And NVIDIA chips are designed to do massively parallel processing, which means that instead of doing a bunch of operations one by one, NVIDIA does a bunch of operations at the same time.
Exactly. And their processors, if you're buying them, like normally that's what all these companies from Meta to Microsoft to just name it, they're all buying NVIDIA processors. But now NVIDIA is switching to subscription model. So you don't have to every 2-3 years to buy new processors, and they're coming every year with the new processors. So now all you do, you have subscription. So as soon as you're replacing older processors with a new one, your subscription includes that. So this is a wonderful model. It guarantees monthly cash flow for NVIDIA, and that makes NVIDIA story even more viable. And frankly, I'm impressed. And the past indicates that once NVIDIA will reach 200 and higher, the stock will be split, either 2-for-1 or 4-to-1, which will make room for even further increases. So to tell the truth, once it broke out of 153, which was a resistance for quite a long time, actually several months, NVIDIA, they were reaching 150, even 153 on a couple of occasions, and then it would reverse. It couldn't break the resistance. And now that resistance, 153, 155, is becoming a support. And the resistance now, there is no resistance because the stock is now climbing almost every day, higher and higher. So far, there is no resistance. And support, there is support 153, 155.
So a stock split. People don't like buying expensive stocks.
Yeah.
Like the stock is selling for $1,000 a share. That leaves out a lot of people who can't afford to buy a share. So what you want to do is to split that stock, say a 10-for-1 split. So you have one share that's worth.
That's what NVIDIA did just a few months ago. They split 10-to-1. Their stock was about $1,200 a share. So after the split, it became only $120 a share. Okay.
And so you get 10 times as many shares, but they're each 1/10 as much money.
Yeah, that's true. So, mathematically speaking, it should not affect the business of the company, the shareholders' perceived value, but it makes it more affordable. And psychologically, it's easier to see stock of, say, 120 a share going to say 160, maybe $200 a share. Now, when stock is $1,200 a share, now $1,600 a share, $2,000 a share. It's almost people cannot swallow. That's a little bit too.
But let's talk about the chips for a second, because a parallel chip kind of works like your brain does. Your brain has to make decisions as fast as possible. If you're driving, if you're walking in traffic, you have to figure out what's going on as fast as possible so you don't make a fatal mistake. And to do that, you have to do a bunch of stuff all at once. You can't wait for like 8 steps of processing to happen. And so these massively parallel chips are faster the way our brains are pretty fast.
Obviously, that's a point. And so far, nothing can compete with that systems for now. Maybe in 2 years, in 5 years, maybe. But in 2 and 5 years, NVIDIA will come up with completely new processors or systems. So, and remember, it's not only the chips and the processors, it's also all software that comes with it. So essentially, NVIDIA provides complete solution. If you're dealing with NVIDIA, you don't need anybody else, because they provide solution top down and left and right. Everything you just get NVIDIA people, you explain what you need, and that's it. That's a one-time, one place that you have to know.
So NVIDIA is worth $4.25 trillion. Does that make it the most valuable company in the world?
By far. And I see maybe even before New Year, it will be $5 trillion company. Nobody can touch it. That's interesting, because if you think about a company like Microsoft, for example, they've been for years, they've been everywhere. They have anything that you can think of, hardware, software, cloud services, they have everything. So how could NVIDIA, which came up, we have this very valuable product of this parallel working processors, how they can eclipse such a powerful conglomerate which Microsoft is. But, well, look at the valuations, and you see that it's real. It's not just one day effect. I mean, it's been there for a few months.
Hey, by the way, before he disappeared, John was bringing up the American population, because I know you brought that up earlier. He said the American population is not expected to drop soon. In fact, it is still growing, but it's at the slowest pace in modern history. If current birth and immigration trends continue, population growth will slow further and may eventually turn negative later this century, likely starting in the 2080s. For the foreseeable future, next 10 to 20 years, the U.S. population will not drop, but will grow very slowly, relying mostly on immigration and slightly positive natural increase. So that's what John has said earlier as y'all were talking about population. So he's thinking that we're going to continue to have growth in the U.S.
All right. So, yeah, I just looked it up, and the U.S. population is growing at 0.5% a year. So it's adding, I don't know, like a little under 2 million a year, which for a country that's 340 million people, that's, not, a huge rate.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
But most of the countries in the world, especially the developed countries, have either very low growth rates or negative growth rates. And after 2050, the only continent that will still have countries that are growing in population will be Africa. And, we've ignored Africa for, we think of it, it was literally called the dark continent because we didn't give a shit about it. But Africa will be the powerhouse of the second half of the 21st century.
Not so sure about it.
Okay.
Not so sure. I've been in Africa once. Several years ago, about 30 years ago, as a geologist, and spent 5 days in French Republic of Guinea, and spent 5 days there. Been out a few times. Been in the Ministry of Mineral Resources, where it's a little shack with no electricity, and in fact they don't have electricity anywhere there. Um, you know what? With Africa, wait for a couple of more centuries until something.
All right, but there's a thing called the Flynn effect, which is in the 50 years after World War II, the average IQ of the entire world went up because for the first time, the whole world had access to information. So, okay, so Africa might be a lot of ministries might be shacks, but if the people in those shacks have cell phones, they can do a lot of sophisticated work and help get their countries get their shit together.
Without electricity, I doubt actually they can have cell phones, unless I'm missing something. But at least at that time when I was there was no electricity. I wanted to make a photocopies of the map that they brought out after I paid them $100 cash, because they told me that they need certain permission, and it will take 2 weeks until they will get the permission. So for $100, they didn't need any permission. They brought the map, which was falling apart, and 4 people were carrying this map. And so, you know what, somebody else probably.
Yeah, I just looked it up. 43% of Africa's population doesn't have access to electricity, which is 600 million people.
Mhm.
But I bet you they figure out how to get their phones to work. I bet you the people there still have phones, even if they have to get on a bicycle and generate the electricity themselves.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it's kind of you have to buy cell phone and a bicycle together, and then you can start using it. It's okay. So people, whole country will get on bicycles, and maybe that's a way to industrialize that place. But to tell the truth, it's not going to happen in my time, and not with my participation. With all due respect.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to speak about something earlier. You were discussing Watergate, and Nixon, the fall guy, so he resigned, and somebody by the name, what's his name? What was the president after?
Gerald Ford.
Gerald Ford. How could I forget? Gerald Ford, as a vice president, so he became a president, and then very quickly lost election to Jimmy Carter. But you see, what's happened now with the Epstein files is 5,000 times bigger than Watergate. Because Watergate, it's a nothing. So the nasty president wanted to use his power. He was punished. He resigned. The end of story. New president lost to Carter. Ford lost to Carter, and life goes on more or less, right?
Right.
Here with the Epstein files, we are talking about all U.S. society. From the very top, they're all pedophiles, they're all rotten. And what you're going to do with that? You're going to fire all of them? You want to kill all of them? What you're going to do with that?
So, I mean, Watergate and Epstein are quite similar in that they're both unforced errors. Nixon was caught sending people to break into places, to steal material, to help with the election. This is so stupid because he had the election in the bag. He won 49 out of 50 states. He was never going to lose the election. And so he should have just...
problem, a stupid mistake, as you said, of one man. Now compare it to the Epstein situation.
Yeah, so, okay, so it's also an unforced error. So Epstein liked banging underage girls, and he brought in other people to do the same thing, and possibly up to 1,000 girls were involved. And the reason he liked other people banging underage girls was, I guess, the more the merrier, but also blackmail. Because if you have evidence that all these other people were basically having statutory rape of underage girls, you've got their balls in your hand. And the deal is, like, if Trump had had the good judgment to only have sex with girls who were of age 18 or older, it's still creepy because he's a fat
After
old man.
21, no, after 21 is a gray area because they are still considering to be underage. Even
All right, but he could have, the difference between, say, a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old is probably just legality for the most part,
So,
right?
so would you recommend people asking for a driver's license before banging them in?
If well,
How old are they?
I mean, but it's stupid and it's creepy, and yeah,
And it's
yes,
hard to
people
figure out because there are
should
some
ask for
with
driver's
the way that
licenses.
things are going on in society. There's some people that are young that look older.
So wait a sec. So the situation is one way or another, a perception, at least for now, is that the country is being run by pedophiles. How do you like that?
It's bad. It shows a lack of judgment, at the
It's not
very least.
judgment, it's a crime. Judgment is something different. That's a crime. So all it's based on, okay, whether the Ghislaine will be testifying or she will be killed on her way to testifying. Uh, it smells so bad, it's impossible. There is a
It
such
definitely smells bad and everything like that. By the way,
it's
folks, like I did last time, I've got to end a little bit early because I still got that other show, and Kim and Nick are still too busy doing their other jobs, and Kim's recovering
okay.
and everything like that. So we got to get ready to wrap up and all along those lines. So I'll catch you gentlemen later on so I can get to Coco show, which is the
All
next one
right.
at 6
See you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
tomorrow morning.